Ah, silly old bear. I love Winnie-the-Pooh. What is up, everybody? Random Man here, bringing you my review for Christopher Robin. Based on the characters created by A.A. Milne and its Disney franchise, the plot basically follows our titular character, played by Ewan McGregor, as he has grown up and lost his sense of imagination, only to be reunited by his old stuffed bear friend, Winnie-the-Pooh, voiced by Jim Cummings. Going into this movie, saying I had a bunch of anticipation to see it is an understatement, as this is probably one of my most anticipated movies of 2018, for me being a massive lifelong fan of Winnie-the-Pooh. Not just of the Disney franchise with it, though I do fondly remember watching the Disney cartoons and consuming all other media with it. No, I was also a big fan of the original stories by A.A. Milne. So this is a property that hits super hardcore with me. I remember having a stuffed animal of Winnie-the-Pooh. I dressed up as Winnie-the-Pooh for Halloween when I was 2, and my liking of honey is probably a result of Winnie-the-Pooh's own love of honey as well. So the list goes on with my attachment with Winnie-the-Pooh. And as soon as the first trailer for Christopher Robin dropped, all of the feels and nostalgia were instantly brought back to me for a now grown-up Christopher Robin reuniting with his old Pooh Bear pal, and this being a live-action extension of the Disney franchise in particular also made me quite interested to see where the franchise could go. Starting out with the cast and their performances, we have Ewan McGregor in the titular role of Christopher Robin. I think he is brilliant here. In many ways, this is a part dramatic and part playful performance for how McGregor is able to approach this character and what he has gone through. As a grown-up, he has fought in the war on the British side and come home to a now dead-end job. Robin works at a luggage company, which doesn't sound very fun in the slightest. So when Robin is reunited with his pals from the 100-Acre Wood, McGregor's own performance is elevated as well, as we do see the shades of his character emerge through his adult body. We also have Hayley Atwell as Christopher Robin's wife Evelyn, and Bronte Carmichael as their daughter Madeline. These two are not in the movie as much as I would have liked them to be, but for the screen time they are given, they are great, especially when they are played up more towards the end of the film. And of course, how could I forget the other members of the cast here that provide the voices of our beloved characters from the 100-Acre Wood. Jim Cummings voices Winnie-the-Pooh, reprising the role just like he did when I was a kid. And it's always a delight to hear this guy as this character. And him being the bear with little brains is always so sincere to see. Cummings also provides the voice of Tigger, the tiger with his bouncing tail, also a delight to hear as well. Brad Garrett voices Eeyore. He has portrayed Eeyore once before, and hearing him in his very glum, very gloomy demeanor and basically having a self-loathing attitude that he is known to have is also very nice to hear as well. There's also Nick Mohammed as Piglet, Peter Capaldi as Rabbit, Sophie Okonedu as Kanga, Sarah Sheen as Kanga's child Rue, and Toby Jones, another notable actor here, as Owl. And I think all of them bring up a lot of the same whimsical and likable nature that these characters have had for many years since I was a kid and even before that. So all in all, with the performances here, I think everyone brings their A game. The writing here and how this movie is set up and approached immediately brings back a lot of the memories I've had in seeing not only the Winnie-the-Pooh cartoons, but also reading the stories from my youth. Right off the bat, as this movie begins, we are treated to a bit of 2D animation reminiscent of the original illustrations of these Winnie-the-Pooh characters from E.H. Shepard, which instantly brought a smile to my face as we see some iconic moments from Winnie-the-Pooh recreated again. And then once we get into the live action portions not long after, we see a younger Christopher Robin having a final meal of sorts with his friends from the 100-Acre Wood before he is sent off to boarding school. That also shifts into a more melancholy tone that the movie is presenting, as the way we see Christopher Robin grow up, again, as I've mentioned, he fought in the war and then also becomes an employee at this luggage company. We see how much he has changed with this montage that also shows him meeting his wife Evelyn for the first time, having their kid, but then incidentally leaving his wife pregnant while he goes fighting off as a soldier. Now, this movie is directed by Mark Forster, and in the past he is known to have directed action movies such as the James Bond film Quantum of Solace and World War Z, but the two films that remind me of the tone of this movie and how it presents is Finding Neverland, which in itself is about the inspiration for the creation of Peter Pan, which later became a Disney property like Winnie-the-Pooh, and The Kite Runner, which is a very good adaptation of a book that I love. So with Christopher Robin's more down and dour tone for the first good portion of this movie, it is easily reminiscent of those other films that I've mentioned directed by Forster, which also brings up how this movie is paced initially, as for the first 20 to 30 minutes or so, this movie starts out pretty slow. It does take a while for this movie to get into the main segment of the plot where Christopher Robin is rediscovering his youth once he is reunited with Winnie-the-Pooh and goes back to the 100-Acre Wood to find the rest of his pals. It didn't bother me that much that the movie was taking this more gradual approach, but it might bother some of the more younger viewers who end up seeing this film. Which, to parents out there, the kids who were sitting on my left as I was watching this film got antsy during some of the more slow moments of the film, so I would say that if your kid is younger than maybe 8 years old, this film is not going to easily hold their attention. In connection to that too, this movie in its overall artistic style and direction adds on to the tone of this movie being dreary, since the color palette of the film is muted and doesn't show a lot of brightness in certain areas to where the 100-Acre Wood is brought back once Christopher Robin is an adult. However, once we are brought back to the 100-Acre Wood, a lot of the magical heart that is associated with Winnie-the-Pooh is in full force. Even during some of the more dramatic moments, there's still a sense of sincerity and genuity with how Christopher Robin, despite being frustrated with his current situation at work and how he is not necessarily that connected with the rest of his family, shows off just how Winnie-the-Pooh is something that is very delicate and handled with such carefulness. Speaking of this movie's delicateness, the way the CGI is handled in its rendering for the characters from the 100-Acre Wood, I thought was done magnificently, as the designs, I felt, were a mix of both the original illustrations by E.H. Shepard and also the designs of how the Disney versions of the characters have been used. And you can obviously tell that they are CGI characters, but that didn't bother me in the slightest either because of how they are well integrated into the movie itself. Rabbit and Owl are more designed like a realistic rabbit or owl, but Pooh, Eeyore, Piglet, Kangaroo, and Tigger are designed like stuffed animals, and their personalities still shine through with how they are designed and interact with Christopher Robin himself. I've also got to say I am a fan of the production design of this film. This movie is charmingly British, like another franchise based on an anthropomorphic bear, which I'll mention later on in this review, as the way London looks itself with the vehicles, the buildings, the costume designs, and just the look of the 100-Acre Wood itself too. It looks very realistic. The cinematography is quite gorgeous and lush. The music, oh man, the music. A lot of familiar tunes from the Winnie-the-Pooh cartoons are used in instrumental reprises here and there, such as the Winnie-the-Pooh song, Winnie-the-Pooh, like that. And just the overall feeling of lightheartedness with the music and its implementation throughout, even in some of the serious moments, I thought added to more of the atmosphere that Christopher Robin created. Also, watch through the credits for a new song performed by a Disney icon. It all runs along mostly well at a little over an hour and 40 minutes. Like I've said, the first portion of this movie does take a bit to get started and get into, so the rest of the movie in panning out, once we do get to see the 100 Acre Wood characters come back, make the pace go along at a more brisk manner. Speaking of other issues people may have with this film, this movie has seemingly got a mixed reaction from the reviews that I've seen thus far. One even said that this is a boring and lifeless interpretation of Winnie-the-Pooh that is unlike what we have seen before. In my defense, I would say that this is something like we have seen before in the way this movie takes its time with its pacing and its approach, as if I remember correctly, the Winnie-the-Pooh cartoons were meandering and gradual with what they were showing with the characters and their interactions. And that's one reason I got the appeal of Winnie-the-Pooh, as we're seeing a lot of things being played up from nothing, as that sentiment is reinforced a lot with this Christopher Robin movie. So in that sense, I got the intention from director Mark Forrester that he wanted to make an extension of the Winnie-the-Pooh franchise in live action that was reminiscent of what was done before with the Disney cartoons in their approach and style. There are certain criticisms I do agree with though, such as the scenes with the luggage company that Robin works at not being of too much interest. The characters themselves that are seen at this luggage company, such as Robin's boss and other employees, seem like flat out caricatures and are silly. There's also the sense of this movie not having a firm stance on its logic with these Winnie-the-Pooh characters coming to life and how other characters besides Christopher Robin can see and hear them. And lastly, this movie does seem to cover a lot of old ground that was covered with Winnie-the-Pooh in the past, but also in its predictability, having a message of rediscovering your own self, finding your inner youth, and not forgetting about the past entirely. So with all of these criticisms taken into account, I would see some of them more as nitpicks. And for further reference, I'm currently 20 years old, going on 21 in just several days, and I felt that a lot of what was presented in this movie from its themes and messages would hit harder to a Winnie-the-Pooh fan the older you are and have grown up with this franchise for a while like I have. So in that regard, Christopher Robin, as a representation of the Winnie-the-Pooh franchise and something for older viewers, I think it fits the bill on both parts and is worth watching. Younger viewers, I think, will get some enjoyment out of Christopher Robin, but I feel they're better off watching the Paddington movies instead, which, what a coincidence. These two franchises both star an anthropomorphic bear of British origins, and they both love treats that come in a jar. Paddington loves marmalade, Winnie-the-Pooh loves honey. And speaking of these movies, I think that these are not only great family films, but are just great films in their own right, as Paddington 2 specifically is one of my favorite movies of 2018 thus far. And while Christopher Robin I don't think is at the same level as those Paddington movies, it's still sweet as honey and will get you in touch with your inner youth, especially if you've grown up with Winnie-the-Pooh like I have. I definitely recommend it. My final verdict for Christopher Robin is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Christopher Robin, social media links in the description, subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.